Okay, welcome to the YSA 20th Word podcast. Okay, tell us who you are. Your full name.
My full name is Joseph Fielding Marriott.
Okay, and so we have Joseph Fielding Marriott with us today. And like I did with the bishop, tell us a little bit about yourself. Introduce yourself to us.
I don't even know where to start. I was born in Central City, Ogden. I lived there till I was about 13, at which point I moved up here to North Ogden. I have 3 sisters, one older, two younger. My father's in the military. My mom works as a math professor at Weber State. My life is pretty simple for the most part.
So because he was in the military, did you grow up and go everywhere, or did you just stay in Ogden?
So we stayed here. My dad's in the Army Reserves as a chaplain. So
cool.
He's deployed, and he will do military drills, but he'll fly out to a certain place for however long. But generally speaking, we've always stayed here.
Okay. So we'll just go deep at the moment. My question that I want to ask you is, if you could describe yourself in 3 words, what would those 3 words be?
Now, this is a really hard question.
I know. It's a hard question for anyone. You can take your time.
Yeah, I'm really trying to think. The first 2 that come to mind, and I realize these are kind of like opposites of each other. I am both very passionate and very lazy.
Okay.
And I'll explain those in a minute. And the third one, I'd probably say I don't even know. I don't
We
know.
can stick with those 2.
Yeah, we'll stick with those 2.
Okay, why do you think you're passionate? Like, how can people see passion inside of you?
So I'm the type of person where when I become involved in something, it's 100% of what I give. It's done. It's there.
Cool.
I will be there until I literally burn out and die, for better or worse. Whether it's helping someone that needs, emotional support, or, literally building fences. I've done that.
So when was the last time that you've done that? Not like build fences, but be passionate and
every
like
day.
Put your heart and soul into something.
So I work as a medical assistant with Ogden Clinic.
I was going to ask about that because you're wearing what you're
wearing. Working as a medical assistant, a lot of times the doctor is there to treat the patient, give medications, create a treatment plan. But a lot of times before the doctor gets in there, working in neurology, we have a lot of patients that have Parkinson's or dementia. And a lot of my job is not to just get the facts and get the information for the doctor, but to kind of help them get to a point where they're ready to see the doctor. Give them that emotional clarity where they're able to work through the distresses that they have. And it's one of the things I love about working in neurology is you have a lot of people who have chronic migraines who can't function, or have Parkinson's who literally can't walk anymore, this, that, the other. And just being able to give them compassion and be able to love them, even though you're working in a situation where it's very professional. It's one of the things I love about the medical field, is that you get to have that closeness, but at the same time keeping a distance for safety reasons. So,
where do you want to go with your career?
So I eventually, the plan right now is to go to med school and eventually become a doctor with a specialty in internal medicine.
Oh.
Now, internal medicine kind of covers everything from endocrinology to neurology, cardiology. It kind of takes a lot of the chronic problems and a lot of the really problems, if you want to call them that no one else wants to touch or take care of, because they are a mess. They're hard to deal with. They're a lot of times the patients are terminally ill. A lot of times And as I've been told, internal medicine, you do the most work for the least pay. And to me, that doesn't matter because I'm there for the patients. I'm there to help them. Um,
So what does internal medicine mean again?
so you cover everything from neurology, which is studying brain function and doing everything from seizures to migraines to Parkinson's disease. You also work with cardiology, so you're looking at afibrillations, the heart, um, to anything from with endocrinology, looking at really weird diseases such as hypoparathyroidism to diabetes, or a lot of times too, we look at how the different diseases and body functions work together, because a lot of people that have chronic problems have a few things that's going on.
Yeah.
And so as an internal medicine doctor, you look at how you help the patient as a whole and not just, okay, well, their heart's having issues, let's fix the heart. You look at, okay, well, how's the muscle structure doing? How are they able to walk? Are they, you look at everything from emotional to the physical to, the organs.
Is it kind of like not just putting a Band-Aid on something, but actually getting to know
Right.
what is the core root of the problem?
Right.
That's what it is?
Yep. No, I'm not sponsoring this show. House the show. He is a internal med doctor.
House. Okay.
Yeah. So for those that do know that show, that's what he does. Yeah.
And you want to do that?
Yeah.
That is so cool.
Yep.
Yeah. I love holistic approaches to medicine, and I could tell that you're going to do so good at that. So that's amazing.
Yeah. It was interesting when I was looking at different specialties. I kind of looked at what I think of in terms of what I do for myself, and I kind of have this ideology where the body, mind, and soul has to be in function together. So if the body isn't resting, if the body isn't being nourished, you're going to have deficit there. If the mind is having panic attacks, if you're having depression, if you are struggling with OCD, you're going to have problems. You're going to not be able to help not just yourself, but others. And beyond that, with the soul, thinking spiritually, if we're not reading our scriptures, if we're not praying often, if we're not doing the things that allow us to come closer to Heavenly Father, we go the opposite direction. And that's kind of how I've tried to live my life, is that you can't just have one of those parts. You have to learn to live all of it together.
And balance is really hard, like
It
mind,
is.
body, and spirit. Because I studied yoga, and that's what you learn.
Yeah.
And it's so amazing to me, and it just like lights my heart on fire. But it's really hard. Like
It is.
you can't just be balanced all the time. But in what ways do you find balance in your heart, what is it? Mind, body, and spirit are connected.
So for me, it comes to a couple things. So physically, so like I'm hypoglycemic, meaning that my blood sugars drop. I have to keep my body. I have to eat, which is, I know it's.
I have to eat.
Yeah, it's like, oh no, you have to eat. But for me, it's making sure that my body has the rest it needs. I find my body doesn't work well with less than 6 hours of sleep, which is kind of annoying sometimes because I don't really care for sleeping because I can do other things while during that time.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
Okay.
I will say, like, I used to be better at this. I don't exercise too much just because I have a few physical conditions. Back in 2020, I had double hip reconstruction.
Wow.
After blowing out the cartilage in my hips.
Double hip reconstruction?
Yeah. So they went into the hip joint and carved out a bunch of the cartilage that had basically been shredded and balled up into part of the joint. They had to basically reshape the structure of the hip, because in the hip you have the ball and socket. The ball part of mine was an oval instead of a ball, so there was
Wow.
it wasn't rotating. So they had to fix that and try to pin some cartilage back into place. As such, I have arthritis, so I can't move like I used to. Back in high school, I was back squatting 450 pounds.
Wow.
I would go backpacking for 20 miles in the middle of nowhere. That was just the life I lived. And now,
Very active.
Yeah. And now it's, I try to go running a mile and my hips hurt. And it hurts to walk for the next couple days. Then in 2021, I herniated a disc in my lower back. So I had to learn how to function with that. So just a few things there. So it's learning to deal with the disabilities or the things you have in your life without giving up the qualities you want in your life. And there is, I will say, there is a grieving process to a lot of those things. Just as if you were to have a friend that you lose, because that's part of your life. It's something you've always known. And when you have that drastic of a change, you have to learn what is the new you. You have to be willing to make those sacrifices and find things that you're still willing to be passionate in. And that's where, for me, the mind comes in, where I've been more academically inclined. I've tried to do more about learning because my body can't do as much. I love learning literally about anything. I've learned everything from learning how to change out pistons and engines to lock picking to we won't talk about everything I've learned, but I get really bored sometimes, and that's kind of where going back to being really lazy is that I love learning, but unless I have reason to do something, I just don't.
Your heart has to be in it.
Yeah.
I totally understand that.
It's a weird complex where if I find something that I'm really intrigued about, it's a full send. It'll be done.
Cool.
And it'll be done fast, and it's just something I almost obsess to. On the other hand, if someone's like, "Hey, you need to clean this," and I'm like, "Nope, I'm not feeling it." It just doesn't happen. And so that's one of the things I have to fight is that internal battle of, okay, I know this needs to be done, and learning to discipline myself to be able to do those things, even though I really, really don't want to. It's kind of that child mindset.
And I think discipline has to, going back to my other question about finding balance, you have to be disciplined in each area.
Absolutely. Yep.
What do you have to say about that?
So that's one thing that's kind of interesting when it comes to mind, body, soul. There's a balance when it comes to discipline, being able to create a routine and schedule and being able to do the things you want and need.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, you have to have the opposite of, you have to have compassion and empathy for yourself. Because without that, you become perfectionistic. You have a nature that is so driven towards things that you forget just how much you lack because you're so driven towards what could be. And so if you can learn to have empathy for yourself and learn to love yourself while having that discipline, you'll find that you don't just draw closer to being a better version of yourself, but you find that as you look at other people, you see not just their flaws, but you see yourself wanting to help them. You see yourself gravitating towards wanting to help them do what you've done. And it's kind of like that in the gospel where Christ says unto Peter, when you are converted, help thy brethren. It's like that in most things. Once we're converted to the Lord, or once we've grown in a certain way, we want to share that, whether it's the gospel or whether it's kickboxing, I don't know. But just sharing that. And I think that's one thing that this podcast is kind of to help with, is to share that community, to find those things that we can become more with.
What do you want to share with people then?
Honestly, my biggest thing I want to share with people is, and this kind of goes to kind of some of the other experiences I've had, is I don't often share a lot of my personal experiences with people for the most part, just because, well, they're personal.
Mm-hmm. It's scary.
Yeah. But at the same time, there are times in which other people need those experiences that we've gone through. I say the number one thing I'd want to share with people, and this is kind of a weird one, is just have hope.
Is there a story in your life that has driven that just have hope mentality?
Yeah, so debating how much I want to share on this one.
Share as much as you want.
So back in 2017, I think it was, 2017, I was called to the California Santa Rosa mission. The first 6 months of my mission were really good, really bright, very happy for me. I found a lot of happiness in serving the Lord. From that point, I was called to serve with another missionary who, to put simply, was not engaged in wanting to serve the Lord. Didn't really care for things that are, well, good.
Okay.
There was a series of events with that missionary and a few other missionaries in which commandments were broken. And there were some very hard things that happened. And through that period of time, I went through a period of depression. There was some abuse without accompanying some other people. And it's hard when you're by yourself and no one else wants to stick up for you. Especially when everyone else sees that everything is good and everyone, well, they're having friends, they're doing good, or so it seems. And you're the outlier, so to speak. And as my mission progressed, because I didn't fit into that group of missionaries that were popular, although they were breaking commandments and covenants, I became known as kind of the scapegoat for a lot of the problems that happened. And it was hard for a long time because that's just the gossip. It was hard to deal with. And then I came home and more problems here and there. But there was a lot of times on my mission and afterwards where I just felt so desperately alone. It didn't matter if there were people around or how much people said, hey, I'm here for you, whatever be it. I could be in a group of 20 people and, talking with them and still feel absolutely alone. And it is a gnawing absence of feeling. And having those thoughts and feelings, as you have those, it's easy to say, well, there's nothing here left. There's no hope. There's no happiness. And I'll admit there was times where I thought about, I wouldn't say ending my life, but I thought about things that were dark. And in the end, if you're willing to put in the time to come to know Christ, and you're willing to have the hope, you'll find there is some light, and that light becomes greater. And that's why I say have hope.
What was it like after that? I'm sure it wasn't like a flip of a switch.
No, it took about a year and a half. And that year and a half, I went through therapy. Talked with a bishop who became a really good friend. It was a process of learning to be vulnerable with myself and becoming very aware of the deepest parts of myself. It was a very long, drawn-out process that was, in some ways, very tiring.
Exhausting.
It's you think of like going on like a 4-mile run or whatever, like you're sprinting through it, like that amount of exhaustion after every time I go through therapy. It's what it felt like. And it's a different kind of exhaustion learning to feel your emotions and learning who you are again. And in that process, learning who Christ is to you again. It's a different process, and I think for every person it's different.
How is it for you?
Well, it's continual.
Yeah.
It still hasn't ended. I think one of the biggest things for me was that even before I had this calling, I was in the family ward doing what I felt was right. I'd go to church, I would, partake of the sacraments, I'd read my scriptures. I think oftentimes we let ourselves drift because it's easy. The process it's I don't know quite how to describe it other than if you're willing to let yourself grow and you're willing to do anything to let yourself grow, you'll find that you'll have some hard months, but at the end you're more happy. You'll find that there's more peace. And you'll find that the things you thought were hard are a little easier to bear. You'll find that you do have friends. The darkness isn't quite so dark.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
And about hope, and like you said, it's a journey. Like we're always trying to find hope, and I like that you said you're constantly trying to redefine your relationship with Christ, and that's really cool. It's not that the relationship changes, but like we're in different circumstances.
Right. Yeah, no. It's interesting is just as we learn here on earth with our friends here, our relationship with Christ changes. I remember growing up, I'd pray to find my tennis shoes for church because I always lost my shoes. I'm still terrible with that.
That's so cute.
And learning to go from that to being in high school and praying for help with my anxiety attacks that I'd have, to being on my mission and praying that the long nights would end, to being now praying like I have the inspiration to know who to talk to next. It's different and in a weird way hopeful. It's you see a lot of growth in yourself, but you also see a change in yourself that's so drastic, at least for myself, that it's weird to see myself in past lights because I don't recognize that person.
That's cool.
Yeah,
you keep on growing, and that's exciting.
Yeah. And I've always wondered, what our parents see as we grow up, from being a kid to being a teenager to an adult. And, just as Heavenly Father sees us grow here on earth, to see what potential we can grow and where we can become.
So I'll ask you this. Yeah. We're almost done, but where do you want to be in a year or two? Since we're talking about growth.
See, that's a hard one. When it comes to growth and putting timelines on things, I'm one that like to create goals to measure growth, but at the same time, I try not to create so many goals or say I'm going to be this by that time, because with me and my personality, I found if I do so, I become overwhelmed.
Yeah. It can be overwhelming.
Yeah. So for me, in a year from now, I don't know if I'll even be in this calling. I don't know if I'll be in this ward still.
I guess who do you imagine yourself being? Like your best version of yourself? Like you just told me that you keep on getting better and better.
Right. So the goal a year from now, physically, is I want to get back into exercising. I don't know if I'll ever get back to, back squatting 450 pounds. That was something else.
That's awesome.
It was amazing. Literally, you could lift anything, anywhere.
Wow.
It was, it was great. But I do want to get back into working out. I think my biggest thing I want to grow in is creating good habits.
We all need that.
It's so true. It's so true. One of the habits I want to create is I want to eat better, and that's so I love Mountain Dew. Like
So does my dad.
Okay, that and energy drinks. I used to be terrible at those. I would drink like 2 or 3 energy drinks in a day, like each having 200 to 300 calories or 200 grams of like caffeine. Not including Mountain Dew. But yeah, no, I'm trying to do better on what I eat, being careful how I treat my body, because I know it does better when I give it better fuel, so to speak. I think spiritually one of the goals I have for where I want to be in the next year is, this is something I've been trying to do, is just knowing. It's one of the things that President Nelson has talked about is coming to learn of the names of Christ. That's one of my biggest things. I'm always trying to find Christ in everything, whether it's the scriptures or how he applies to little things. I think that's the biggest thing that I want to grow in this next year. I find that it's harder to grow spiritually and mentally than it is physically. And people could contest that, and so be it. But yeah, I think just learning, constant learning, seeing who we can become, whether that's becoming a better student in school, having better study practices where, you're not doing homework for 20 minutes and then 4 hours of YouTube or it.
Especially when you're going into being a doctor.
Right. I have cut down on that a lot, which is good. But, it's kind of goes back to learning and changing, but having compassion for the little things.
And grace.
Yep.
Wow. You are a really awesome guy. I literally didn't know you very well, but like you have so much depth inside of you just from all of that advice. So I feel like I want to be more graceful to myself, and I want to focus on my mind, body, and spirit, that relationship. So thank you so much. And I'm sure that anything you said helped the people that are listening. Anything else you want to say before we end?
Nope, not particularly.
Okay, well, it's evening, so good night. We'll talk to you on the next episode.